pleasure to be here at Bharatauvacha. All the organizers, especially Mrs. Ananda Shankar Jayanth, who's taken great pains to bring us all over here. So the subject of my lecture here this morning is temples, treasure civilization. We all know that a temple is a religious institution. That's how it was created, that's how it is, and that's how it must be. There's no doubt about that at all. Whether it's a small shrine under a tree in some small village or something like this that you're looking at on the screen, this is the grand Brihadishwara temple in Thanjavur in Tamil Nadu, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's called the Devalaya Chakravarti, that is the emperor among temples, but you could apply that title to most temples in India. They're all Devalaya Chakravartis. We understand that other than being a religious institution, these temples stand for everything that our culture is about. Take for example, these architects who built the temple, these tapatis and the shilpis and the sculptors, they were all great engineers, they were architects, they were geologists. Now we have separate institutions for all these. I go to the School of Architecture, School of Engineering, and then I'm a geologist. These were all rolled into one. Why geology? Unless you knew your stone, you couldn't build a temple like this. If it's granite, it's one kind of architecture. If it's sandstone, it's another, marble another, soft stone, it's another. You can't have a uniform kind of building activity for all these different types of stones with different textures, etc. They had to know their rock. You know that most of these temples have temple tanks, the Pushkarinis? Yes, religious structures. We have a bath there before going into a temple. The Utsavams are sometimes celebrated there, all that. But then, when you're going to build a temple this size, you have to test the soil. So a lot of soil was scooped out, and then the architects and engineers got to work to find out whether it was a suitable spot for a temple of this proportion and size to come up, and that part became a temple tank. And it served a lot of purpose, including water harvesting. Water harvesting is something that we talk about a lot today. Our ancients did it, and they did it inside or immediately outside the temple premises. Imagine the sculptors and the architects who built these temples. This one, same one, completed 1,000 years in 2010. This is a little temple, sandstone from Odisha. This is a lovely little temple of the Nagara style of North Indian style of temple architecture from a little village called Osian in Rajasthan. We are going to the grand Modhera Surya Mandir, the sun temple in Gujarat. You have that lovely soft stone Hoysaleshwara temple in Halibid in Karnataka of the Hoysala dynasty. You have the wonderful temples of Khajuraho made of sandstone. Now, all of these were created by architects who had a great lineage, the Vishwakarmas. The knowledge was passed on from father to son, guru to shishya, very, very, very long lineage. Each of them experimented. The ground plan is the same for a North Indian temple, South Indian temple, wherever you are in India, there's a uniformity of architecture. Only when you pay attention, you'll realize that. But then there are regional differences. So many experimentations, ideas, they were artists, they were very creative. And that lineage, that tradition has come down, 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 down for hundreds and thousands of years. It is still there in India today, though we don't build temples of these proportions anymore. These architects were adept in the texts. They had to learn the Agama Shastra, the Shilpa Shastra, Vastu Shastra, all these sciences. Shastra is science. And then there was ground activity also. If you were following the tradition of your father and you decided to become a stapati, you would follow him round into the temple premises. You would follow your guru, your acharya into the temple and learn how they were made. Stones were not readily available. They were sourced from many great distances away. Elephants were used, manpower, over water, over land they were carried. They were stacked one above the other. No binding material, no cement, nothing like we have today. They were kept one above the other. A special interlocking system was used where one stone fitted into another stone. You try pulling down a temple mantapa, very difficult to do because that interlocking system is well in place. It's very, very intact. So a special system of building, a very special system of sculpting, all that was there. Very seldom when we visit a temple do we understand the amount of energy, intellectual expertise, practical ability, experience that has gone into it. We just go there, we look at it. Now we are time bound, 5 minutes for this temple, 10 minutes for this temple, 5 minutes for selfie time, all of that. That won't work. We need to concentrate. We needn't understand how they did it, but maybe just pay some attention, some respect to these great monuments that have been left behind for us. So architecture, yes, and I'm only skimming the surface here, they were also centers of sculpture. Many of these temples are treasure troves of iconography made with the most nimble of fingers. Stones can break. There are two ways of making sculptures. You get a stone and then you carve it into a Ganesha or a Nataraja and then you keep it on the temple wall. That is an easy method because suppose you're making a mistake as you chisel, you can keep that rock separately, go and get another one, make a perfect image and put it up on the wall of a temple. The second method of doing it is by carving on the wall itself. And that is extremely difficult because if you made a mistake, you can't chisel off the wall, you can't replace the wall. So you had to be an expert, you had to have a lot of concentration and make it just so perfect that nothing ever went wrong. So 1,000 years later, some tourists shouldn't come and say, look, I think this guy made a huge error. That shouldn't happen. And they were all perfect. This is a tiny, tiny image of Ganesha, again from a temple. This is called the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram. I'm not being parochial or regionalistic, it's just that I come from Tamil Nadu, so I have a lot of photos from that region. Ganesha, we recognize fine because, we pray to him every day and we've read so much about him. This image becomes a little more difficult to identify. It's got Shiva in a special manifestation as Lingodbhava Murti. He comes from a pillar of fire and Brahma going up is not able to find his head. Vishnu going down as Varaha here is not able to find his feet. He was such a big pillar of fire. There are some regional variations as well. So unless we are ingrained into a little bit of our itihasas and puranas, makes it very difficult to identify and therefore admire these sculptures. Now this particular sculpture I want you to see. It is from the same temple, this Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram. It was built in the 8th century CE during the dynasty of the Pallavas, whose capital Kanchipuram was, and it was constructed in the reign of a king called Rajasimha Pallava. And therefore, the name of this temple originally, now it is the Kailasanatha temple, originally it was called the Rajasimheshwaram, the Ishwara temple named after King Rajasimha. I'd like you to look at this sculpture. There are two men standing next to each other, legs crossed. It's clear that they are fighting. Each has a bow in his hand. The person on one side has a crown above his head and the other one has some kind of peculiar headgear. So we could just look at it and walk away and say, I don't know what this is. Maybe it's, the king and somebody else fighting and he portrayed this war scene over here. Or we could stand and stare and try to make something out of it. There are two ways in which we can identify sculptures. Either, we read up on all the itihasas and the Puranas and local legends and then go into a temple fully armed with knowledge and say, yes, I know all this. Or maybe we can have a little bit of knowledge and then you can go in and try to identify. If we can't, then go back and try to find out what it's all about. This is one such. A normal visitor to this temple wouldn't be able to identify this sculpture. The person wearing the crown is Arjuna, the Pandava prince. The person next to him is God Shiva. Though you will not know it, he doesn't have the emblems of Shiva over here. And here Shiva comes as a hunter. He is a Kirata. There is this little story among the many stories in the Mahabharata, just like the story of Shakuntala and Dushyanta, which is a little episode in the Mahabharata, but it was turned into a world famous story by that immortal Kalidasa. Similarly, this is one such. Arjuna, the Pandava prince, goes to the Himalayas. Many of you know the story. And he meditates upon Shiva, does severe tapas penance, and God Shiva is very pleased with him. And he comes to give him what Arjuna wanted, that astra, that missile called the Pashupata Astra. Shiva is Pashupati, so his weapon is the Pashupata Astra, which Arjuna wants. Now, before giving it to him, he wants to test Arjuna's valor, his courage, his capacity to hold that weapon. So, what he does is transforms himself into a hunter, a Kirata, comes with Parvati. She also comes as a wife of a hunter. And he sends a wild boar towards Arjuna. And Arjuna is going to shoot it with an arrow. Same time, Shiva shoots his arrow also, and they both get fighting. This is what the god wanted. God fighting, the fight lasted for a very long time. Shiva won, of course, but he had tested the courage of Arjuna, was very pleased with him, and he was going to give him this weapon. And Arjuna also realizes that it's God Shiva himself. So this is why here, to identify, Arjuna is depicted as a prince, crown and all, though he wasn't wearing a crown at that time, and Shiva is depicted as a hunter. Both have bows in their hands to indicate that they had shot an arrow at the Varaha, the boar. Now, if you look behind the leg of Arjuna, there is the Varaha. The boar is over there. I couldn't take a better picture because there was a pillar in the way. But you'll clearly notice the body, the snout is behind the pillar. Now, this particular sculptor wanted you to know that it is the story of Kirartha Arjuna, Kirartha Arjuniyam. So, he has put the boar also over there. Now, why would this sculptor, anonymous of course, they hardly ever left their names behind. Unlike us today who put our names first and then start out to work, they were always anonymous. You see, this story from the Mahabharata was taken by a great scholar named Bharavi, who lived in the Pallava court in Kanchipuram in the 6th century CE. And this sculptor, who lived 200 years after Bharavi wrote the famous work called the Kirartharjuniyam. Obviously, in Kanchipuram, most people knew about this. This sculptor was a learned Sanskrit scholar, it seems to me. So he wanted to depict this fight, which had been glorified in Bharavi's Kirartharjuniyam, and he put it over the walls of the temple. So unless we know those stories from the Itihasas and Puranas, we'll never be able to identify these sculptures. Though I don't have a particular photograph with me, I'll try to paint a word picture of it. In Hoysala temple in Karnataka, close to Hassan, 3 hours from Mysore, there is a lovely panel, miniature, this much. Warriors, each on a chariot with arrows flying thick and fast. So if you take a child there or show a student a picture of that sculpture and ask them what it is, they'll clearly say it's the Mahabharata war, it's a Kurukshetra war. So you ask them, you will ask adult also, they'll say the same thing. Then you say, how do you know it's a Mahabharata war? Oh, because that's Arjuna on the chariot. How do you know it's Arjuna? That's because Krishna is a charioteer. How do you know it's Krishna? That, but nobody, there is no clue there to show you to the uninitiated whether it's Arjuna or Krishna. But if you look very carefully, as it is, the sculpture is very small. On the chariot of Arjuna, on a little stick-like thing, this size is the figure of Hanuman. So Hanuman was on the flag of Arjuna, so that's how you know it's Arjuna. Always go to sculpture, that appreciation. And then do you know that's Arjuna, so the charioteer is the Sarathi is Krishna, Parthasarathi, and then that's the war, and opposite is some enemy, perhaps Karna. So this is the intricacy, the knowledge that these sculptors had, and they and we'll be the poorer for it if we don't appreciate it. Now temples are centers of performing arts, for sure. You know, all these things had to learn the 64 arts, Chatushashti Kala. and among which music and dance were also there. They were great patrons of the performing arts. So on the walls of temples, you see sculptures of musicians and dancers. You have various musical instruments, many of which are not in vogue today. They have disappeared. We've let them disappear. You have inscriptions giving the names of musical instruments. We are not able to match them with the sculptures of almost all, but the sculptures are there. In the Tanjavur Brihadishwara temple, you have this row of sculptures of what the great king Rajaraja in the 11th century to depict the 108 karanas or the dance movements on the walls of this temple. It's sad that only one got complete, that's there, but anyway, when they knew down south and Land's End all of Bharata's Natya Shastra, more than 1000, even much more before that, and they got it etched on the walls of their temples. At the same time, when Abhinavagupta was writing his commentary on the Natya Shastra up there in the north, deep down south, these sculptures of the same Natya Shastra were being done. Talking about unity of temples as cultural spaces, of course, where you have dancers, you have musicians. Dance and music were part of what is called the Shodasha Upachara. Today when we go to a temple, you see the priest lighting a lamp, lighting an incense stick, giving the god a ritual bath, the abhisheka, putting new clothes on the deity, all of that is there, we know it. But those days, the Shodasha Upachara, 16 different kinds of offerings were given to the deity on a daily basis, of which one was Sangeetam, music, the other one was Natyam, dance. So inscriptions across India tell us that these many dancers, these many musicians were in the employment of the temple, like the priest, like the watchman, like the accountant. They were all there, and the dance was before the deity, for the deity. It was a ritual. All that has moved out of the temple and it has come to air-conditioned halls. That was the source. Rangolis, dedicated people, it was not exactly only for money, though they were paid, like this lady whose picture I took some 2 weeks ago, as educational centers. How can a temple be an educational center? They had libraries. The libraries were called Saraswati Bandaram. What a beautiful name. Bandaram is a treasure. Saraswati, the treasure house of goddess Saraswati, treasure house of learning. And loads of manuscripts. You have inscriptions talking about such Saraswati Bandarams. But when you have a library, it means there's an educational institution there. And that educational institution was a Veda Patashala. Not only the Vedas, other allied texts, grammar, Vyakarana, logic, Tarka, Vedanta, Mimamsa, so many things were taught over there. So you had a temple, you had an educational institution, and you had a library as well. What more do you need? There are inscriptions that give you, and this I have to read, forgive me, I can't memorize all these things. There is one decrepit temple in Tamil Nadu, but safeguarded by the Archaeological Survey of India. 1000 years ago, this Narsimha temple had 270 students, junior, 70 senior students, 14 teachers. The Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharva Vedas were taught there. 75 students for the Rig Veda, 75 students for the Yajur Veda, 10 for the Atharva Veda, 20 for Sama Veda, 25 for grammar, 35 learnt the Mimamsa, 10 learnt the Vedanta. The salary given to the teachers, the stipend given to the students, it was mostly in paddy. Students had to write exams. If they failed in the exams, all these stipends were stopped and they had to go for bhiksha. They had to earn their own food. Then in another temple it says, not only the temple, not only the Veda Patashala, there was a hostel for the students. The students were treated royally. They were given oil baths once a week. They had wick lamps. Scented roots were put in their water for them to drink. And then what if they fell ill? You can a student, you can fall ill. There was a hospital attached to that. And the hospital had these many beds. The name of the hospital is also given. The 35 Ayurvedic medicines that Ayurvedic practitioners use even today are given in that inscription. They were stored in the hospital. 2 doctors were there. Their names are also given. Nurses were there. People who could scout the countryside for the herbs with which to make the Ayurvedic medicines were also employed. Beautiful setup. Temple, Veda Patashala, hostel, hospital. No, you're talking about grand universities in the world today. We had all of that in every part of India. Some parts of India may have inscriptions intact, other parts it's been damaged, the temples themselves are not there, where the Pathashalas are not there, we don't know what they learned. But this can't be an one-off thing. I'm sure it was there all over India. We can find some evidence sometimes, perhaps. So I'm running out of time. So let's understand that the temples were socio-economic centers, employment to so many people. The temple that we are seeing today is only a religious edifice, but it was much more in the past. Let's bring it all back. Thank you.